What's going on, my friends, my family, my fellow gamers? This is your boy Portorock77, your only friend in these YouTube streets. Let's get right into the video and to the point. Why I think it's a bad idea for Sony to get back into handheld gaming. So this all started with some news about Sony filing a patent for some game cartridges, which sparked, assumptions, guesses and stuff like that. Is Sony, does this relate to possibly with the PS5, or is Sony stepping into handheld gaming again? Ultimately, totally separate things, some type of toy that's specifically in Japan, or maybe it's sold worldwide, but it has nothing to do with the PlayStation. But it sparked some interesting conversation on Twitter, and I gave my viewpoint of why I think Sony should just stay away from handheld gaming. I thought I'd flesh it out with a video because, Twitter, you got limited characters and that's it. And some people don't read every tweet you put. So a lot of the stuff that you say on Twitter gets lost in translation because people who read it are only reading the specific tweet. It's hard to read everything that you tweet out. So let me do this, keep a video. All right, I'll do that. So let's start out with a couple of things. All right, my opinion is not based or here to dictate what you enjoy. All right, it's just simply a reality of what we already know and what's been happening. Okay, in no way is what my view supposed to change of how you feel about the PSP or the Vita and how you play the games. It's not about how you emotionally feel or whether you personally have fun. It has nothing to do with that. For example, Sega Dreamcast, right? Phenomenal console, love the games, one of the best consoles I ever owned. But objectively, it was a failure in the sense that it only lasted 2 years, it stopped production, and there was no more games making for it, all right? So even though I loved the product, it didn't last long. Overall, it failed, all right? So keep that in mind as I go on with this. So why do I think it would be a bad idea for Sony to get back into handheld gaming, all right? So let's start off with the PSP, right? The closest of success Sony had in terms of handheld or dedicated handheld. The PSP ultimately ended up selling 80 million units in 10 years. It launched in 2005, if I remember correctly. So dedicated handheld sold 80 million, right? A lot of people see that as success. 80 million, if you sell 80 million of anything in console gaming or in gaming in general for dedicated, that's usually a sign of success. But here's my issue with that, all right? PSP's 80 million is similar to PS3's 80 million, right? They both sold around 80 million, except PS3 did it in a shorter time and it launched at a more expensive price. And it took longer for the PSP to reach 80 million. So that's one. It took longer. But still, it is 80 million, right? Here's the thing. Here's the kicker. The kicker is, what is the whole point of the 80 million sales? The whole point is those 80 million are playing games, right? And the way you could tell if they're playing games is total game sales. I don't really care about ratios. It's all about the total game sales. And the total game sales of PSP at 80 million does not compare to the console counterparts, right? For example, I was just doing research and looking at the archives for PlayStation, Sony's, oh my God, what's the word? The stuff that they give to their, stockholders or whatever, the quarterly reports, whatever. PSP's lifetime sales as of March 12th, all right? So you're talking 7 years after release, was around 330 million games, give or take 340 million games, right? As compared to PSP, as compared to PS3, which had a shorter time, it was 595 million, so close to 600. So both products are 80 million. One sold 600 million total games, software titles. The other one sold around 340 million. That is a huge disparity in game sales. So now I want you to think about this. Sure, PSP sold 80 million, right? So that means a gamer went into the store and bought a PSP. And when you sell 80 million, when you sold numbers that high, you attracted the casuals, right? You got the hardcore, you got the casuals, and you got everyone in between. That's the only way you could sell dedicated gaming product that high, all right? So you got 80 million people, but you're not selling that many games. So what does that mean? You got a lot of console sales, but not a lot of software sales. Well, simple. People went and bought the PSP, right? But once they owned it, and for whatever reason while owning it, they didn't buy games. Chances are they were not satisfied with the product. They weren't happy with the product, okay? And regardless if you like the product or not, a sell is a sell. Once you buy that PSP, it counts as a sell. Doesn't matter if you go back to GameStop and, trade it in towards a console or to other games or whatever. The trade-in doesn't mean nothing. It doesn't negate the sell. 80 million is 80 million. You can't take it back, all right? But if you don't see the game sales reciprocate that 80 million, something's wrong. That means majority of the people who bought the product are not enjoying it. They're not buying the games. They're not playing the systems, all right? Chances are it was relegated to the hardcore who did homebrews or bought games. But again, there wasn't enough hardcore to really push big sales, right? So you have to look at it as, was PSP really, truly successful, all right? What's funny is, if you look at the PSP, right, and you can see that the games aren't selling. Now, there are a few notable games, individual. There's a couple of games that sold great, like Monster Hunter, Grand Theft Auto, Gran Turismo. There's a few games that are a big seller in its own right. But the overall content, selling only 340 million games with a user base of 80 million PSP sold, that is terrible. Again, PS3 has the same amount, shorter time frame, and close to 600, almost twice as much, And then when you look at the other products like PS1 at 100 million, almost sold over 900 million games. PS2, 150 million, sold a billion games, 1.5 billion to be exact. Even now with the PS4, it's at around 85, 86 million, and there's over 700 million games. People are enjoying the products, and when you enjoy the products, guess what you do? Guess what you do when you own a gaming product and you enjoy it? You buy games because you're enjoying it. If you don't buy games, you're pretty much not liking the product that you have. Again, these users attempted to bought it. They went out and bought it. But once they had it, they probably weren't impressed with it. Now, the question is, why did it sell so many? Why did it sell so 80 million if throughout the time people weren't content? Well, you have to understand, it was the PSP. It was the first of Sony's attempt at a handheld. So it was built off the hype of the company. From the creator of the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 comes PSP. That is a lot of hype. There was a lot of expectations from gamers. Everybody had an expectation that Sony could possibly dominate the handheld industry in the same fashion that they dominated the console industry. Remember, PS1 dominated, PS2 dominated. Now they're releasing the PSP, right? This was before PS3 debacle, right? And in the end, it didn't work out. I remember back then, the main complaint was, it was, how would you say, a downgraded home console experience, Most people wanted a mobile experience, and they didn't get it, kind of like what Nintendo does with the DS, which ended up selling 150 million, right? That's just the reality. Now, if I would have had a channel back then, in Twitter and all the social media platforms, and I were to seriously sit down and look at the PSP and see these numbers at the time, I probably would have predicted Vita was going to fail. Why? It's simple. You have people that go out, hyped over the whole PlayStation, made a portable, dedicated device. It's going to kill Nintendo DS, all that stuff. But in the end, majority of people didn't care for it. With that kind of distaste or lack of interest probably carried over to the Vita, and people were like, you know what? I didn't really care for the PSP. So chances are, I'm not going to care for the Vita. It's not doing anything different than the PSP does, other than like the touchscreen and the touchpad and all that stuff. But it's pretty much, console on the go or whatever, with games that were best played on the console or whatever people had their opinion bit. All right. So chances are, a lot of the people, like I'm one of them. I bought the PSP. I had a PSP. I only played like 5 games. I really didn't like the whole experience behind it. I played Metal Gear. I played Siphon Filter. What was another game? There was like 3 or 4 games I played on that stuff. Ultimately, I just had enough, and then I just stopped playing it. And then it got stolen, and I don't even know what the hell happened to it. So I'm pretty sure a lot of other gamers were the same way. We went out, we were excited. Let's try it. Got it in our hands. I'd rather just play a console and then completely forget about it and not buy any more games. That's ultimately the fate of it. So you could pretty much predict. Then when you add the other stuff, with the Vita, and we're going to talk more about that, with the card and whatever, they're very expensive proprietary cards. That was a project in itself. But going back to the PSP, clearly see it wasn't really successful. Now that doesn't take away from the library it did have, the games it did had, how much fun you had. You have to look at it from the business perspective. Some people be like, why do you care about the business side? I'll get into that. I'll get into that in a few minutes after that. But from the business perspective, low game sales. They're selling these hardware consoles so people could buy games. That's where the real money is at. It's the game sales. PSP didn't have great game sales. So I don't think it was very that successful. Now, fast forward to Vita, which kind of bled over. I think a lot of people who owned the PSP didn't want a Vita, so they didn't get it. Vita was very expensive. And then on top of that, those damn memory cards was very expensive. I think at one point it was like $100 or whatever. So that killed it. Vita was a complete disaster. It was a failure to the 10th degree. It was just a complete failure. Now, again, some of yous, the 10 people that did buy one, that's a joke, you probably did enjoy it. You probably enjoyed a lot of games. That still doesn't detract from the fact that it was a failure. A failure is a failure. There's nothing you can do about it. All right? So now, with that said, why do I care about the business aspect for Sony? Ultimately, the business side of Sony and this stuff is what I can get as a consumer for what I want, which is the console. I prefer the PlayStation console. I think the PlayStation console has been the best console. I think Sony overall has dominated the gaming industry in terms of consoles, right? I enjoy the products that they have. I enjoy the games. I enjoy the exclusives. I enjoy Sony's first-party publishing. I'm looking forward to the PlayStation 5. I want Sony to focus on the PlayStation 5. I want them to put the developers and any money towards PlayStation 5, any features for the PlayStation 5, PlayStation 5, VR, because that's a big thing, and the network. Everything, every focus of effort to the PlayStation 5. If Sony goes and tries their second attempt or third attempt really at a handheld, it's going to come from the gaming division. It's going to come from the budget. It's going to come from allocated personnel, If Sony really wants this portable device to be successful, they have to put their top tier developers on a handheld. A PlayStation portable device will never be successful without the compelling software. We're talking big budget, compelling games. You're not going to sell a PSP device or Vita 2 or whatever they'll call it to play, backgammon or Minesweeper or any crappy game or derivative game or any shovelware titles. It has to be big, blockbuster, compelling exclusives. And who are the ones that make big, blockbuster, compelling exclusives? It's Naughty Dog. It's Santa Monica. Those guys are the ones. Even Polyphony Digital for you Racer guys. They are the ones that will have to make big games, big exclusives. Something to compete with Nintendo. But while they're making these games for PlayStation Portable 2, let's call it PSP 2, right? That's less time they're making games for the PlayStation 5. And that's just a reality, Sure, you could develop new teams to make PSP 2 games, right? But if they're new teams, then that means you ain't got the very best to support this new platform, right? And if you don't have the very best, then why are you pushing out anyway? You're going to have to make a stance. If they make a handheld and you want the handheld to be successful, they have to put in big quality games, big quality exclusives. They have to, it's no different than the consoles. It's no different. It's a gaming device. And gaming devices for games. You can't put derivative games. You need big quality exclusives. Obviously, Sony will always work out to make sure it gets the best third-party support, so you don't have to worry about that. But it needs big quality exclusives, and you would have to use Sony's best studios. I don't want Sony to waste their time on that. Whatever second they have to make a game, they should spend it towards PlayStation 5. All right? Again, also, the money. What it takes to build it, research, design, all that stuff. That's all going to cost money, all right? Any money, any cent that goes towards the PSP 2 should go to PlayStation. PlayStation develop games, improve the network, give us dedicated service. Anything is better than actually dedicating and investing money. Now, and here's the final kicker. If they do release the PSP, right? Sure, it could be successful. Hey, good then. If they release a PSP, it's successful, they make money, the growth of the gaming division will be good. That money will be reciprocated back into the handheld. It won't really help PlayStation 5 because, they're going to use the money to keep boosting up PSP. The trade-off, though, is what if PSP 2 fails? Doesn't make money. In fact, it starts losing money. All right? Now, do I think it's going to crush? I made a joke or an exaggeration on Twitter about, the end is near. I do for shock value. But in reality, though, if the PSP 2 fails and loses money, right, it's going to get recouped off the hide of the PlayStation 5. Meaning, and this happens all the time across the industry, any game that's not announced, you'd be surprised how many games that were in development that we know nothing about were canceled. All companies do that. EA, Ubisoft, the developers pitch a game, they have concept art, they greenlight it a little bit. Within a year or two, they look at it, they see the progress, and they're like, you know what? Nah, we're not feeling that. Game cancels have all the time, for games that haven't been announced because they cancel in the early stages. If the PSP 2 fails and loses money, they have to offset that. They can't just write off a revenue loss. They're gonna want, as a business, do something. And usually, the first thing that will go is projects. Some projects will be like, you know what? Hey, we lost some money here, so that project you're doing there, at first we were like, that's cool, let's try it out. But now we're not going to invest in that project because we need to cut the funding off like that. And they do that all the time. All right? Again, we don't know it. We don't see behind the scenes, but that's how companies run. They try to offset losses one way or another, within their divisions. I don't want to see that happening. What other projects, unique projects, innovative projects, new IPs that they have, whether it's indies, double A's, triple A's, single A's, whatever, quadruple A, I guess is a new thing. I would like to see those games come into fruition. I would like them to actually be something to the point where they could show a teaser trailer and then they'll show in-depth gameplay and then they'll release it. At no point do I want to see any of these projects go out the window. At no point do I want to see any delay in improving the network or them not doing dedicated servers. All the stuff. Think of all the things the console, PlayStation 5, and anything surrounding PlayStation 5 to include VR can accomplish when money's not wasted on a handheld. And that's ultimately the point. I don't think a lot of people, the majority, want a PlayStation handheld. I don't think they care for it. I'm sure there are PlayStation hardcore fans that want it, but you guys are in the minority, right? And it's just going to drain money overall. I don't think it's going to be successful. I think it's going to drain money. And Sony has to make decisions to protect their own interests. Listen, at no point should you ever feel any of these companies your friend. None of them is your friend. They have an allegiance to their own self-interest because that's their livelihood. That's how they send their kids to private school. That's how they drive their, their Maseratis and stuff like that. That's how they spend weekends in the Hamptons or in the French Swiss Alps, whatever. That's how they're able to do what they got to do. That's how they have nice houses in California and Washington, all that stuff. That's how they got nice monies and live a lavish lifestyle and run a company. Their allegiance is to the company because that is their livelihood. That is what they make their cheddar and bread. And they will protect the assets and interests of the company, So if PSP 2 fails, Sony's going to make a decision on what they got to do to offset that revenue loss. That's just how business is, all right? In my opinion, most people didn't get the Vita. Most people didn't buy the games for the Vita. So why are we pretending everybody wants it? Sony already tried twice. It didn't fail. Sony's into mobile gaming in terms of the phone. Let them have those little divisions. Those little tiny $2 games, free-to-play games, easy. Let them have it. It doesn't take much. You don't see them needing Naughty Dog to make a damn Android iPhone game. They don't need that, all right? But if they want to do a PSP 2, right? And the reason why I say PSP 2 is because Vita failed, so I don't think they want to make a sequel or, a follow-on to a platform that completely failed. It was complete. It's the Wii U of handhelds, right? So they'll probably do a PSP 2 or PSP 3, well, PSP 2, whatever. Long story short, they haven't been successful with handhelds at all, okay? Sure, some people say, well, you got to try, you got to compete with Nintendo. Hold up, time out. Sony does not have to compete with Nintendo in a handheld, okay? Well, Nintendo needs competition. That's not Sony's problem. If Nintendo gets stagnant, nothing says that, you know what? You see what Nintendo's doing? They're still pricing their games at $60. They're doing this, they're doing this. They're not being very consumer friendly. We need to create a PSP handle so we could provide competition so Nintendo could be better. No, Sony's not having that conversation. They don't care if Nintendo gets a big head. You know what I'm saying? You know, and stuff like that. They don't care. They don't care if Nintendo needs somebody to kick their ass so they could reset themselves and do what gamers want. Sony's not responsible. Sony's not responsible to make Nintendo better by providing a competition. Again, these companies are there for their own self-interest. They're going to do what they're going to do based on what's best for them. They're not going to care about, you know what, we need to make a console because we definitely need, Nintendo needs competition. Competition is good. They don't care about that. That's not what it is. Ultimately, it's their own self-interest. And for me, what they do best at, Sony, is their console. You know, provide the games, get the best third-party support, and get those exclusives out there of various forms, whether it's indie, single A, double A, and especially the big triple A's, and get new IPs. You know, now some people, you guys are gonna say, well, doing a PSP doesn't take away from it. Again, it goes back to my point. If PSP fails, Sony potentially can shut down some unannounced projects that we could have known, but now we will never know, because they have to offset revenue loss for the health of the overall gaming division, right? And that's how you have to look at it, okay? Anyway, so that's my view. That's how I see it. I think it's a bad idea. Sony already tried twice. Just let it go, move on, and that's it. But anyway, you let me know what you think. Hit me up in the comment section. This is your boy Porter Rock 77, your only friend in these YouTube streets. There in my description box, you'll see the link to my Twitter. And also, if you're new to the channel, hey, don't forget to hit the subscribe button with the notification. And then everybody, please hit the like button. I truly appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this video. And again, I'm out. Peace.